Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Life Wrap Up. Joe Samyega here, along with Alex Anderson from the Gay Racing Podcast. We have Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight, and from Grid Encore, NASCAR.info, Ben Schneider. A big welcome and thank you to all our viewers that subscribe and hit the bell icon for not missing any of our programs, and especially our Patreon subscribers, Colin the Show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You invest in us through Patreon, you get some Grid Network stickers and a thank you letter sent out to you. Plus, if you do $10 or more through Super Chat or Buy Me a Coffee, you'll get stickers sent out to you. We catch you on the air doing Super Chat or buying us a coffee. We'll thank you on the air. And of course, big thing, if you're watching us live, comment in the chat room. Love to see everyone there. I see we have Dylan watching. Howdy. Big welcome to you, Dylan. Thank you for tuning in. And one of the big things, since we're talking about Texas, NASCAR, well, a lot of stuff going on in Texas with the MotoGP as well. But let's start with the Auto Trader Echo Park 400, which saw plenty of issues throughout the race for all the drivers. The race leader, Kyle Larson, it looked like he was going to have a pretty smooth, dominant day. But once that right rear tire came off, it just, I think, threw the race into a new direction, was just even more cautious and more cautious. Christopher Bell, of course, early in the race, he hit the wall, took out Alex Bowman when he got significant damage from hitting John Hunter Nemechek, trying to avoid Christopher Bell. Ryan Blaney, hard hit on the wall, coming out of turn 2. Then he looked like he was going to take this win. Then we had another caution. He lost it battling Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott, he goes on, gets the win, returns to victory lane. First time with Hooter sponsorship. He did the Polish victory out lap in honor of Alan Kulwicki. He said it was even emotional for him. We know he's been through a lot since his last win at Talladega in October of 2022. So, Alex, starting with you, should we have been surprised that Chase Elliott got a win today?
Well, first, a few things before we talk about that, Joe. Number one, if you're curious on our thoughts on Fox, you can check out the stream Ben and I did the other night with you, Joe, talking about if IndyCar should sign with Fox Sports. If you watch that, you'll get an idea of how I felt about today's broadcast.
And Alex, to follow up on that just real quick.
Yeah.
I think it might be a little bit outdated at this point because we should have postponed the roundtable until this week after the broadcast that we saw today. I think easily Fox's weakest of the year here. I still think Kevin Harvick's doing a great job. He's coming into his own as an analyst in the booth. But just from a production standpoint, way too many of those Zoom cuts, which are nothing new. I think NBC's just as guilty about it in many respects, but Fox especially today was really heavy on those, and just the commercial timing as well. It seemed like every time there was something that happened on track or an incident, just Fox was taking a commercial break because there are far too many of those. But that's a tale as old as time. We can have a whole nother roundtable debate on that based on the F1 coverage we've been treated to in the States here over the last several years. But I'll shut up now, Alex. I'll let you actually answer the question that Joe asked, but just had to comment on that since you brought it up right there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, check that out. It was a lot of fun. Checked out that stream from the other night. But second thing I want to mention is shout out to Noah Sweet. You might know him as Lefty Designs. He designed that Hooters car. He also designed the Raptor Byron scheme from last year. Really happy for him. This is the first time Hooters has won since Alan Kulwicki drove it. So that's pretty cool. But to get to the question here, should we be surprised that Chase Elliott got the win today? I don't think so. However, I would not have picked him to win until he actually got a win. Now that he has a win, I might feel more comfortable picking him for pick a winner, just because he just hasn't been himself in the past year and a half since his injury. I think his mentality's just kind of been off. But Kevin Harvick said it several times on the broadcast today, like, this is a different Chase Elliott. He's driving very aggressive. And that's the kind of Chase Elliott that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. And I'm not surprised. I think Chase Elliott can win races. He can win any week. But as Harvick kept saying in the broadcast, he's just racing differently. His mentality seemed to be back to how it used to be several years ago. So I'm not surprised, but I didn't know when this was going to happen. And it's good to see Chase Elliott back in victory lane today.
Yeah, it definitely is. Just looking at the trends from the last couple of races here, 5th at Richmond, 3rd at Martinsville. So I guess it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. He has been heading in the right direction. I think he definitely started the year off Probably is the number 3 Hendrick car behind Byron and Larson, or Larson and Byron, depending on what order you want to put those two in. Just for whatever reason, I know Elliott and Bowman both had their injuries that they dealt with last year, and Chase had, the suspension as well. Just really a complete throwaway year for him last year. But the 5 and the 24 teams seem to have been on a different level than the 9 and the 48 groups the last year and a half or so. So it's good to see the 9 team get a win again. Good to see Chase Elliott do that as well for his season and his momentum. And I guess we're coming back to the track that up until just a few hours ago was his most recent win in the Cup Series. So maybe he can go back to back there, and who knows? I mean, the season's still young enough. If he keeps trending in this direction, like you said, Alex. Now that he's got one, I think that's probably the hardest one to get. It wouldn't surprise me if he racks off a few more even before the playoffs begin here.
Coming in at the right time with Talladega, good opportunity for him to get another win, get his fans very excited, and then all the talks about him being contender for the championship. Great time for Chase to get a win. And like you said, Alex, I think for pick a winner, I kept thinking, when's it going to happen? It has happened now. I think a lot of folks, today they picked Kyle Larson. Next week, I think Chase Elliott is going to be a very popular pick. One thing we know for sure, there'll probably be more than 2 cautions at Talladega. Today, though, 16 cautions, and yesterday, I predicted we'll have 10 or more continuing this trend. I did not anticipate this many. Cars were just losing it, hitting the outside wall. We did see side-by-side racing, but definitely if you're on the outside line, you had a little bit of a disadvantage. Overall, it seems to be better than before, but I still got to ask you, though, starting with you, Ben, is this generation of car improving what we're seeing at Texas? And do we still need to see a change at Texas Motor Speedway?
I think we have made some progress. I think the 1.5 mile package as a whole obviously is better than it was with the Gen 6 car, but I still just I don't like this track. I'm sorry. I think it's a shame because I think they had a really good facility before they reconfigured it, and then whenever it was 2016, 2017, they just absolutely destroyed turns 1 and 2, and it's been a mess ever since. I don't like, and I got to say, Joe, I know you brought this up in the chat as well. I do not like how many rear end hits into the wall after spins we saw today. And I think that if this had been a couple of years ago and ultimately what prematurely ended Kurt Busch's career, I think we could be talking about something a bit more serious today. Alex Bowman had that happen in the fall race here in 2022. So I hope that everybody's all right. It sounds like, I haven't heard anything, in terms of injuries or people, being held at the care center or anything, because I know that there was some attrition towards the end, but not a fan of that. And again, it doesn't. I mean, the Xfinity race that we saw yesterday, I think was pretty good. The finish obviously was off the charts, and we'll talk about that more on the Encore show tomorrow. Obviously, the Truck Series is still whatever, I think, but I don't know that because of how badly turns 1 and 2 are messed up. It's nice to see that there are at times a couple of different lanes and grooves that you can run at that part of the racetrack, but I just think overall, it's going to be hard to match the quality of races we might have seen here in the 2000s or early to mid 2010s before they reconfigured it. So I think it's a shame. I know that people go crazy with the Walmart parking lot jokes, but especially with the fact that IndyCar is not there this year, I think that there might be some merit to them.
Yeah, this was a better race than we've had maybe the last 4 times we've been at Texas for the NASCAR Cup Series, but is it anything to be happy about? Not really. Like, it was an okay race. Like, I thought it was okay by all means, and I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed myself watching it besides the broadcast, but it was pretty good beyond that. But for me, it's still a very weird track, and we're going to have another question here in a minute if we should change it or whatnot. But it's a not good racetrack still. And we've seen with the Xfinity cars, they can put on a good race there. We've seen with the Indy cars, they can put on a good race here. The Gen 7 car, it's weird. It's more entertaining than it was, say, 2 years ago right now. But it's still not good. We're having way too many cars just, instantly start spinning. And as you mentioned, we had so many of those rear impact hits. There are probably 6 of them at least. I specifically hope Denny Hamlin's okay. He's had back problems before. even going back to last year, he had some injury, and it's concerning that this is still happening, specifically at Texas. Like, it's very scary to think about. With Alex Bowman's injury, it was pretty much exactly what we saw several times in this race, and hopefully the changes NASCAR's made to the rear end of the car showed its prominence today, and that no one is injured, no one has any concussions or anything like that. But overall, Texas is okay. Like, it was better than Martinsville, which I never thought I'd say that in my life, but it was okay.
No, that's a low bar given the short track, current state of short track.
I know,
race.
but it's Martinsville.
Yeah.
I know. I'm not used to short tracks not being good, especially Martinsville.
The short track package, that definitely needs work. You bring up Martinsville, a lot of folks anticipate that to be a track with beating, banging, a lot of cautions, cars dropping out. Texas, with this reconfiguration, especially with the two different ends, I almost think you could a little bit in a way compared to Darlington, especially how treacherous it was. Alex, considering the Darlington style track where you race the racetrack, do you think that was a little bit of that, or do you still think Texas in general just needs to be fixed, paved to get rid of this format of the wide 1 and 2 that's flatter and then traditional 3 and 4 like in Charlotte?
In terms of attrition, yeah, I can see Darlington kind of being similar to Texas now, but I don't like it. It's just, we shouldn't be like, oh, there's a chance you're just going to snap loose and crash. I don't like that. I'm still on team basically copy and paste the Charlotte Roval and put it at Texas. Let the Cup Series run that. Let IndyCar have the oval. That's what I'd like. I know that'll never happen because it would require teamwork with NASCAR and IndyCar, and we're obviously not getting that. That's what I would want. But if we can't have that, I'd rather they try and figure out something else with this track. From what I've heard from fans at the track on social media is that this track is kind of just stuck in the 90s, hasn't really been upgraded since they built it. So, I mean, eventually they're going to have to remodel it, right? And they'll probably come with a reconfiguration of some sort. And I would assume that's going to be like another Atlanta sort of situation, which I don't think I would necessarily like. We'll see what they end up doing, but I don't think this kind of racing at Texas is something that we should be really wanting to stick around, because it's still very much an anomaly on the schedule. Just what other race besides like Daytona and Talladega do you just have so many back-to-back-to-back cautions, you know? Just no.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add here, although I will say that that's probably the only change that they could make to this track that is worse than the status quo is if they just clone Atlanta. I would not be a fan of that. I would not be a fan of super speedway pack-style racing. I mean, my goodness, when you get up to 8 races potentially, I don't know if Texas would get a second date back. They'd probably try to give it to them if they went down that path rather. Yeah, I mean you're talking almost a quarter of a schedule at that point, so that's not something I would like to see. But I would like to see an improvement over what we have now. I think, again, I remember the first Texas race I ever watched was spring of 2007. I remember that last lap pass with Jeff Burton and Matt Kenseth in that great battle there. Obviously, IndyCar's had some fantastic races there over the years. I think at one time, certainly the second biggest oval on the IRL schedule. Obviously, Long Beach coming in after the merger, I think made that the second most prestigious race. But everybody looked forward to Texas every year, put on a great show for that series. And again, it's unfortunate the way lack of cooperation with NASCAR worked out, but they're not there this year. Hopefully, they come back next year because, like I said, I think it's not really worth it in my mind for NASCAR right now to be at this place, because I just don't think the quality of the racing has been very good over the last several years since they reconfigured it.
Yeah, and the Dallas-Fort Worth area is still a very worthwhile area and market for NASCAR to be in. So I think we need a race here. It's in a good area of town to have just a racetrack and everything. I know the Walmart jokes aside, they should have a racetrack here, you know? But it's just, what should it be? I think the most likely, as you said, Ben, and I said a minute ago, is probably a super speedway, and I don't think either of us would like that. It should have been Texas first before Atlanta. I think everyone could agree to that. But I don't know what they're going to do. Like, do they want to have potentially, 8 super speedway races on the schedule. That is way too much, in my opinion. I'd rather that not happen, but I do think the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it's an important market for NASCAR to be in, and IndyCar as well. IndyCar needs to be in Texas in some sort as well. But I feel like the best way to do that is IndyCar Oval and Texas a Roval for NASCAR. But again, that ain't gonna happen, especially with COTA so far, so close. It just won't happen like that.
What if they just embrace all the memes? They get Walmart to buy into it. They build the biggest super Walmart in the country on the facility, and then they host a race in the parking lot. And anybody saying that well, you can't host a race in the parking lot, didn't they do that at Caesar's Palace once upon a time? I mean, it would certainly be entertaining and give us something to talk about.
Why not? I think most of those street courses nowadays are basically in parking lots.
Yeah,
so why
there
not?
you go.
They should build an Applebee's not too far so they could be a little bit corner with the Applebee's parking lot as well too. So if you get that, you'll understand.
Yeah. My Carmen would like that one.
Couple of comments. Well, one comment in the chat room from Dylan. I sat and watched Brad Case on board as well as Blaney, and was so disappointed to watch him lap after lap after lap. Get a good run, too close, slow down. Get a run, too close, slow down.
Yeah, Dylan, I hate to say it, but Alex might appreciate this. I was getting Kansas 2020 Kevin Harvick kind of vibes there with, because Keselowski was clearly the fastest car of the top three there at the end. And just, every time he got too close, I don't know if the air would just come out from under him or what, but he'd have to lift and, need to work to get that run again. And then, like Dylan says here in the comment, it was an endless cycle. And I think that's ultimately probably cost him the win today. I think with a different package or a different track, he probably had the pace to pass both of them.
And if this was Kansas today with this current package, I think Brad probably gets up front and leads this race.
Yeah.
But it's still a Texas. Texas is still part of the problem. I think the Gen 7 car is also part of the problem with today and now the current Texas, everything. But I just feel like Texas is still a core problem, and we're not going to be able to fix it unless they just either reconfigure it or they just redo it all entirely. Even if they bring in a perfect car for 1.5 mile short tracks, whatever, this current Texas is still very flawed.
Yeah, well, I know it's a perfect segue because we're just about to get into it here in our rundown. But you talk about Chase Elliott's winless streak. I mean, Brad's cars have been running so good over at RFK, and I know his winless streak's over 100 races. I think now dating back to 2021. So I know there's a lot of Ford fans, a lot of Brad fans, a lot of RFK fans that are pulling for him to get a win because I know he's gotten a few as an owner with Buescher, but he does seem like he's knocking on that door here, and again, probably had the pace to do it today. It's just unfortunate that the circumstances didn't work out like that.
Circumstances didn't work out. Race results are official. So Chase Elliott, your winner. Brad Keselowski, there was some people wondering if we got second or third. He has to be feeling pretty good overall, but like that comment in the chat room, just couldn't get there. But he was the highest finishing Ford, so something he could say, hey, I brought Ford a good finish today overall. But the big thing we noticed, Joey Logano, he led 14 laps, just missed out on the top 10 essentially. You had Ryan Blaney, he led some laps, turn 2 wall, ruined his day. So I have to ask, is Ford knocking on the door to get a win into victory lane sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think so. And like we just said, I think Keselowski certainly had the pace to do it. Again, I think it's just a matter of time. I think, if we get to like June or July and they still don't have a win, like, of course, start ringing the alarm bells there. But, if they keep running like this, they keep putting themselves in, these kinds of positions here, whether it's with RFK or Penske or, even Stewart Haas seems to be turning a corner maybe a little bit. Who knows what's going to happen? But, they keep running like this. It's bound to happen eventually. You're going to, you could almost do it by accident with some of the ways that these races are playing out with the multiple overtimes that we saw today. You just never know how the end of these races are going to go sometimes where, if we got another overtime today, there would have been some cars close on fuel potentially, I think. So, Ford keeps putting themselves in these kinds of positions. The speed, I think, is certainly there. Maybe it was lacking a little bit at the start of the year in terms of race pace. Obviously, we're talking about how great they were qualifying and locking out front rows and stuff. But I think that, the pace seems to be coming back during the races. It was there at the end of the day for Keselowski. I think that they're certainly knocking on the door of that first win this season.
Yeah, Ford will get a win this year, and it's coming soon. They haven't won a race in the Cup Series, Xfinity, or Truck yet, which I find pretty staggering. But I don't think it's as alarming as some people have said, but it's definitely not ideal for Ford. But they've kind of been slacking in this next-gen era, unless it's a championship race, because they've won both next-gen championships. But they'll get a win. I'm not too worried about Ford overall. They are behind Chevy and Toyota, but they have been since the start of the Gen 7 era. And that's something they're going to have to keep working on.
No doubt they'll be working on that. I have to ask you both. Speaking about Ford, Todd Gilliam ran the top 10 at times, but 31st place finish. He seems to have some races where he's up there, but can't bring it home. Michael McDowell crashed out while trying to run in second place. Overall, he has essentially, out of the races so far, 3 finishes in the top 20, his best being an 8th place finish. I have to ask you, when it comes to front row motorsports, we know they have the technical lines with Penske. They started off fast with the grade 2 qualifying efforts early in the year. But what are your expectations of them now? Are they meeting your expectation? Are they behind? I'm doubtful they're exceeding your expectations.
Yeah, Front Row Motorsports, they're a very interesting team. They just keep getting better, it seems, every year. We saw Michael McDowell win at the Indy Road Course last year on pace, which that surprised me at the time. But this year, today at least, they had both cars in the top 5. Usually when they're running really well, it's just the 34. Today, at times, you had both Todd Gilliland and Michael McDowell up in the top 5, top 10. I know at one point they were running 4th and 5th together, which I think Todd Gilliland just keeps getting better and better. I'm really curious to see how he's going to be doing in toward the end of the season or even next year, because I think he's just going to keep getting better. But Front Row, they're pretty much where I expected them to be, but then I looked at the points when I was reading our outline. They're lower in points than I thought they were. Michael McDowell is 22nd, and Todd Gilliland is 24th in points right now. And Todd Gilliland, that's about where I expect him to be, right? But Michael McDowell has been right around 16th in points when we come to playoff time. And sure, it's a bit early in the season still, but I think my conclusion is, yeah, they're running where I expect them to be, but they're not finishing where I expect them to be. They're not finishing where they've run. And that's something that Front Row is going to have to clean up as the season goes on. And sure, there's some bad luck. I mean, McDowell, he spun out, one of the unlucky guys to spin out. The car just kind of flipped on him there. But not much you can do about it. They just got to they have to put these races together all the way through.
Yeah, I don't know if you can say Front Row's come back down to earth necessarily, but it does seem like it's a bit of a slower start than they've had the last couple of seasons, which they've really taken some steps forward. Like you were mentioning, Alex, frequently I think the most improved team year to year over a couple of different seasons with McDowell. I think it all started when he won the Daytona 500 and then racked off a couple of top 10s to start the year. And then had some moments here or there throughout the rest of 21, but you kind of knew he was going to be a first round exit when it came time for the playoffs. But then you fast forward a couple of years, winning again at the IMS Road Course, straight up on pace. You can't make the Super Speedway excuse for that one. He flat out went and took that and earned it 100%. And again, I think some of us expected him to go a little bit further even in the playoffs than he did, based on how he'd been running up to that point. It wasn't like it was just a complete one-off either. So, again, we just talked about Ford, being winless, across all 3 series to start the year. They were, you could not get any closer. I feel terrible for Ryan Sieg, coming so close to that win in the Xfinity race yesterday. But I'm sure wins are coming for them in all 3 series. It's just a matter of time. And who knows, maybe Front Row will be that team to break through. Because like you said, Todd Gilliland, I think, is running well. He's up front. He's led some laps here or there. Even, he seems to have top 10 pace. It's just a matter of finishing the deal that he seems to be struggling with right now. And, again, McDowell, I think, has had some decent runs, a couple of top 10s here and there to start the season. But, again, still looking for that consistency that we were talking about with the last couple of years and those steps forward the Front Row have taken. I don't think that progress has gone away. but for whatever reason, they just haven't been able to close the deal this year. So hopefully, for the sake of the rest of their seasons here, as we approach the heart of the season and get ready for maybe another playoff run for Michael McDowell, he can start making some progress back up the standings a little bit and refine that magic that he found the last few years.
The magic, that's something they're going to be looking for at front row. Right now, though, if some drivers are thinking of getting a win, especially at Talladega, where it almost seems sometimes magic, fate dictates everything. Right now, 6 different winners in the first 9 races. So we're 10 winners away from filling up the full 16 spots with race winners. If that happens, one of the big things, 17 races left. So in theory, it could still happen. The first year with this generation car, pretty much I feel that was the closest we got to it really happening. Of course, Kurt Busch, he missed out the playoffs, but do you think it's safe to say that we won't hit 16 winners before the playoffs?
I don't know if it's safe to say. We still have a ways to go, as you said, Joe. But with the playoffs coming, I think something that's more notable to me in that is the fact that we've had 2 winners, Daniel Suarez, Chase Elliott, who were not in the playoffs a year ago. So that means we're going to have drivers who were in the playoffs last year who will not be in it this year. Of course, Kevin Harvick is one of those. He is retired. But now we have one guaranteed spot. Someone who was in last year will not be entered this year. And I'm very curious to see how that shakes out. And that's also a misstep for Michael McDowell, potentially. That could be one of Michael McDowell's spots that he's going to miss out on. Like, that's going to be something we're going to have to follow throughout the rest of the season here with the playoffs.
So 6 winners in the first 9 races. We need 10 more to get to 16, and we have 17 races in the regular season. I think there is 0 chance we get to 16 different winners. I think that the amount of parity that we've seen over the last couple of years, I think has started to go away with the next-gen era. And I got to say, I was listening to SiriusXM this week, and the point was brought up, and I guess it remains true today with Chase Elliott's win. If you take away Daniel Suarez and Trackhouse's win at Atlanta, the races this year have only been won by Hendrick and Joe Gibbs. So, you take those 2 organizations, even if you grant all 4 of their cars at those 2 teams' victories, that's 8 different winners. You got to think Suarez won't be the only one, so maybe you get to 10 or 11. But I think 16 is really going to be pushing it at this point, with the amount of repeat winners we've seen and the dominance that we've seen from just 2 teams here to start the year so far. Again, like I said, I think it's inevitable Ford gets a win eventually. So, you want to talk about 10 or 11 total different winners. I think that, we'll certainly get there when it comes time for the playoff. But at the rate it's going, we might not even get to 16 through all 36 races, let alone the first 26 before we lead into the playoffs. I think it's very unlikely at this point that we're going to see that much parity in year 3 of this next-gen car.
And just to counter, I do agree with you, Ben. However, there's something to note. Like, Stewart-Haas Racing seems to be a bit better. You could get 1 or 2 of those cars to slip in there.
Sure.
Michael McDowell could, of course, get another win. There's several road courses coming up. He's also really good at the super speedways. Penske hasn't gotten a win yet. Blaney's going to be in there on points probably if we don't get to 16. But and you got Truex, who's running a lot better as well. You've mentioned Gibbs. But I do think it's possible. I think the chances are the slimmest they've been yet with the Gen 7. But I do think Stewart-Haas is kind of the wild card here. If they can kind of put together, I think Gregson could steal a win. I think Josh Berry maybe at a short track or Ryan Preece at a short track could really possibly put something together.
All right, I'll tweak it. I'll give you a 1% chance. Is that acceptable?
That's fair.
There you go.
Now, speaking about, how if it wasn't for Trackhouse at Atlanta, it would be all Hendricks. Let's talk about a couple other Chevy drivers. Carson Hocevar spun early, but got a top 10 finish, so Spire Motorsports have to feel pretty good about that. And RCR, they look better today. Overall, they're getting to the point where, compared to where they were before, you see there Austin Dillon, Kyle Busch, both in the top 10. But I got to ask, is this a sign of progress from Richard Childress Racing? Or is this more that they survived the race because we saw Kyle Busch crash in practice? They essentially had a clean race. What do you think, Ben?
It's probably a combination of both. And by the way, while we're talking about Chevy teams, Colleague Racing, both of their cars in the top 20 today as well. I know they had a dreadful qualifying this weekend and had a lot of progress to make up in the race. And I think Ty Dillon was 16th in car number 16, and then Daniel Hemrick squeezing into the top 20 there with a 20th place finish of his own. So again, for a team whose motto is trophy hunting, that's certainly not where they want to be, but it is better than they've been to start the year. So moving in the right direction for sure. But again, I think part of that as well was just, we did see a lot of, it took us multiple overtime attempts to finish the race. Obviously, a lot of cars had problems all throughout the race. And I think that it's a combination probably of them being able to take advantage of that while also being able to be confident in saying, maybe we have made a couple of steps forward because, again, Kyle Busch, a great recovery drive for him, and Austin Dillon. I think if there's anybody that needed a top 10 run, I mean, at this point, for how his season's gone, a top 10 has to feel like a victory. And again, for the history of RCR, particularly that number 3 car, that's not ideal to be in a position like that where a top 10 feels like a win. But again, it can't just happen overnight. There has to be some sort of sign of progress. And I think, again, and even Spire, like we mentioned, I think it's taken a step forward this year from where that organization has been in its young history. I think, Team Chevy can, obviously acknowledge that there's still work to be done, but it is a good step in the right direction based on these results here today.
Yeah, Carson Hocevar, very impressive today. Had spun at one point, came all the way back up, and not getting in his own head and taking himself out. That's a huge improvement from what we've seen from him in the past. I also want to mention his teammate, Zane Smith, was running in the top 10 or top 5 at a point. I know he finished 26, so the result doesn't really show that. But really good for him as well. Because I believe before this weekend, Zane Smith was last of all the full-time chartered cars. That's not the part-time 31 car, or part-time drivers in that car. So, or 16. I forget which one is part-time. But anyway, very, very interesting for Spire that how well they're running now compared to how they were a few years ago. And RCR, I don't know. Because Kyle Busch was running in the 30s for quite a lot of this race. I know Keselowski was back there for a while. And my friend Zach, my podcast co-host, mentioned on Twitter that Keselowski, Jimmy Johnson, and Kyle Busch were all fighting for 34th at one point today. Tell that to someone in 2017. I'm sure they'd have a fun reaction. But Brad managed to recover. I know Kyle finished okay. But RCR, I'm still very cautious about them. And Ben, to go back to the playoff question, I would question if those two even make it, honestly. I think the 8 will probably make it on points, but I don't know. That RCR has just kind of been out to lunch all year.
They got to have this weekend's schedule coming up because I think, obviously, if the cars have enough speed, they could, Dillon in particular, I think he's going to have to try to sneak out a win on a super speedway. But, Dillon, I think for sure is in trouble if we're talking about making the playoffs. I would say Kyle Busch probably is going to find a way. Obviously he's still got a tremendous amount of talent and wouldn't put a win past him this year. But it does seem like, like I just said, good result today, but, still some work to be done there. And Alex, just to follow up your point on Zane Smith as well, I actually just pulled up the owner's standings, and the Spire 71 is still 36th out of the 36 chartered entries. So it hasn't been a great start to the year for Zane Smith, but Colleague 16 team was actually, I think, 3 points ahead of the 31 car that's driven by Hemrick full time. So again, that unusual strategy in this day and age of using a rotation of drivers in a chartered full time entry. Again, I wouldn't say it's working out for Colleague, to have their 2 cars 31st and 32nd. But actually, if I do the math right, I guess that means Ty Dillon would have leapfrogged Daniel Hemrick today because he would have made up 4 points based on the finishing results. So 3 points ahead with that 16 entry right now. So, yeah, there's some interesting notes and nuggets there on the back half of the standings.
Yeah, and I actually want to bring up a point because we mentioned Colleague. There was a lot of chatter about Colleague this week about them potentially selling a charter. Stuart Haas Racing was also in that conversation as well. Do you think Colleague should sell a charter, Ben? Because I personally think that they should sell one because this whole part-time thing isn't working out. I think they should have kept Allmendinger in there instead of Hemrick. I just feel like for the betterment of their Xfinity program where they actually excel, it'd be better for them to sell the charter. But what do you think?
Well, I made that exact point on last week's show. I said, and not just one of them, I said I think they should seriously consider selling both of their charters.
Oh, wow.
When
Okay.
you consider what Live Fast just went for to Spire Motorsports and the amount of money, the amount of investment that Trackhouse and Justin Marks is willing to put into this sport right now, I don't know if they're going to fetch $40 million for both or what those numbers could be. But Trackhouse, I think, has a surplus of drivers right now because they seem to be committed to Daniel Suarez, despite those rumors, and to Ross Chastain as well. And then you've got Zane Smith in the equation. Who knows what's going to happen with Shane Van Gisbergen in his career? But I could see that entry or that organization rather wanting to potentially go up to four full-time chartered entries. And just do the math here. They've got two right now. Colleague has two. They seem to have a very close business relationship already with what they're doing with SVG in the Xfinity Series. So if you're Colleague, why not go rack in, a healthy 8-figure sum and payday with those two charters? And they only paid $10 million for theirs, if I recall correctly, when they came in 2022. Wow. So, I think they could turn a profit on those, and it would be a great return on investment for them, and then pour all that money into your Xfinity program, go full time there. And then you have enough money to pull out the open car every once in a while and go trophy hunting with AJ Allmendinger or SVG on a road course. I think that would be a lot more fun than being 31st and 32nd in owner points right now with two full-time charters.
I totally agree. And you know what? They could just be the feeders program for Trackhouse. They could just be in the Xfinity Series, and they can take any developing drivers they want to, that Trackhouse wants, have them at Colleague, then go up to the Cup. I think that'd work out. And then, as you said, they have an open car. They could have someone they want to run Cup someday in that fifth Colleague car.
That could be
Trackhouse car. Yeah,
that could be the new Project 91 car. Because if Trackhouse goes to four full-time charters, they wouldn't have that option anymore. They could, just utilize that, and that could be another opportunity for a good partnership there.
We just solved all their problems.
Yeah.
And they make a bunch of money off of it. Why not?
Definitely, we're going to try to make sure they get to watch this. All the folks at Colleague. Of course, NASCAR Cup Series next weekend are going to be at a track where Colleague, they're definitely going to be trophy hunting. Talladega, we'll be previewing that right here on the Grid Network, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Alex, thank you so much for joining us for NASCAR coverage. Before we let you off the air, what is your one shining moment from this weekend's race?
Well, it's not to do with this weekend, but it's about what's happening next weekend. You see I'm wearing an IndyCar shirt. It's a Joseph Newgarden shirt. And IndyCar's back. They're coming back from their hibernation. They exist still. The series didn't die. It was greatly exaggerated on social media. I was part of that after thermal and everything. But they're back this weekend at Long Beach on NBC. Or it's on USA. It's not on NBC. But watch IndyCar. That's my shining moment. IndyCar's back. It's alive. Don't forget about it. I know a lot of you probably did. That's my shining moment, because IndyCar is back, and pretty much back for the rest of the season, because there's no giant gap in the schedule like this.
But is that right? The second most prestigious race of the year is on USA?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, unless it changed. Yeah, it's on USA.
Oh, brother.
Still some work to be done over the IndyCar front. Alex, thank you so much for your time as always, and we encourage everyone. Links to the Gay Racing Podcast on the video description. Check that out. I know it's going to be a lot of fun to hear what they have to say about this weekend. Speaking about fun, we got to bring in Kobe because Ben, the other race in Texas, MotoGP, boy, was that a lot of fun.
It certainly was. And I don't get to watch MotoGP as often as I do some other series that we cover here at the Grid Network, but I'm glad I turned this race on. I wasn't so glad when I saw my pick winner, Marc Marquez, go down from leading the race, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. But how would you like to have Oliver Rowland, Marc Marquez, and Kyle Larson as your pick winners today? I certainly had a disappointing ending to my pick winner run myself here with these picks this weekend. But we'll get into MotoGP here right now. Like Joe said, a thrilling Grand Prix of the Americas, many calling it the race of the year. I know several of us were doing the same thing in our great group chat. Maverick Vinales went from pole to 11th at the end of lap 1 to back in the lead again on lap 13. His Aprilia bike with medium tires was hard to beat. Got around Pedro Acosta for the lead there at the end. Now, Vinales is the first rider to win on 3 different manufacturers, those being Suzuki, Yamaha, and now, of course, Aprilia, who gave him another chance after the ugly Yamaha split that he had not so long ago. So, Kobe, let's start with you here. Been a while since Maverick Vinales got a win. I think a little over 3 years since he won a feature race. How big of a redemption story is this for him? And does this potentially make him a championship contender in 2024?
I'm going to start off by saying that the Grand Prix of the Americas we saw today at COTA is an all-time MotoGP classic. That's some of the best racing that I've seen since I started watching MotoGP just a couple of years ago when I started here at Grid Network. Got to tip my hat to all those riders. That was a great show and a wonderful way to transition to the NASCAR race at Texas earlier today. But to answer your question, looking at the point standings right now, Maverick Vinales still has a little ways to go before he catches Jorge Martin at the top of the standings, as you can see. But who knows what can happen? I think he has a lot of momentum right now, especially after getting this big win. A lot of people are saying, this is the Maverick Vinales of old, and if he can keep this up, for more consistently, I really think Maverick could have a really good 2024 season. I don't know if I want to call him a championship contender yet, but I think things are really looking up for him right now. And you mentioned the word redemption. Considering what he's been through in the last couple of years, I think that, this is a huge shot in the arm for him, because when he was at Yamaha, he was very consistent, performing extremely well. And then, first little bit of his time with Aprilia, not really going so well. Really seemed like he had taken a step back. And today was a glimpse of what we know Maverick Vinales can be. And it's interesting to see what he's able to do the rest of the season.
Maverick Vinales, this is definitely a story of redemption. I think one of the big things that has been really great to see Maverick Vinales go through this journey after that ugly split with Yamaha, Aprilia took a chance with him. A lot of folks were thinking, why are you doing that? He's not going to deliver. He's clearly going to be behind Aleix Espargaro. And that looked like it was going to be the case. But last year we saw some improvement. And Aprilia still kept with Maverick Vinales. This year we're seeing a little bit more improvement. And then when he got the pole, which surprised everyone, because on the pre-race show, especially after Jorge Martin set a new track record in the practice before qualifying, we thought, okay, it's going to be another Ducati. And then Maverick, killer lap, takes the pole, takes a sprint, and then this race, that first lap, first corner, falling outside the top 10, I was so focused on what was going up front, I didn't realize how quick Maverick Vinales was coming up. And then once he got to the front, everyone started wondering, does he have enough tires on the rear end, using up those medium tires? Pedro Acosta was on the same tires, the medium tires. But wow, he was able to pull away even when Acosta got less than a second with 2 laps to go. Again, he just pulled away, got a win. So overall, I feel he has to be a contender now for the championship. He is showing he has improved a lot. I think him and that team are really pretty much now one. They've got the chemistry going for him. Overall, Maverick Vinales, what a success story to see what he's been doing since joining Aprilia, and just keep building and building. And today, that was the highlight. If he could continue this on, he was super fast. He could probably bring something to the Ducati riders.
Great redemption story for him. And as you see right there, third in the standings. So like you've mentioned, if he can keep this up, certainly trending in the right direction. And again, my apologies. Like I said, not a series that I follow as closely as the other 3 F1, IndyCar, NASCAR. It's Aprilia, not Aprilia. I think I said that a couple times here in the intro. So my apologies there. But we move on now to the second place finisher today, Pedro Acosta in the Gas bike, stealing the show in a KTM RC16. The rookie's been getting better and better week in and week out here, leading laps and lead KTM bike all weekend. Youngest rider to do back-to-back podium finishes as well. So, Joe, we'll go to you first this time. How impressive was he? Should he maybe go to the factory team?
Oh, man. He is just putting on great race after great race. On the pre-race show, I was talking about how if you're going to get into the top 10, especially in the sprint race, Pedro will be one of the weakest links because he's still a rookie. He can make a mistake on this track. Wow. He must have been motivated after those comments because he was fighting Jorge Martin, Pecco Bagnaia, Marc Marquez, bringing the fight to them. These are some of the biggest names in MotoGP. You have Marc Marquez, multiple-time champion, Pecco Bagnaia, and he was cool, calm, and collective to the point where as he was chasing down Marc Marquez front tire went out, game over. I was just blown away by his performance today. He made me a true believer because I keep thinking with the rookies, we see some rookies, they'll have a fast start, and then as the rookie season goes on, they start to fall from top 5, top 10s, and then reality, you're still a rookie, you got a lot to learn. He is just killing it out there. They trust him with parts that are experimental. You know KTM has to be thinking about, okay, Jack Miller, he is not delivering. Brad Binder, he's hit or miss, but Jack Miller, I think, is on the hot seat. Acosta definitely could be going over there, but we got to see what that team's doing because right now, Gas, with that bike they have, year old, they're looking really good.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. And it's just so impressive what this 19-year-old kid is doing against all. You mentioned them, all the big names of MotoGP. A lot of 19-year-olds would be very intimidated to be racing, the names like Pecco Bagnaia, Marc Marquez, Jorge Martin, all of these big name MotoGP stars. And for him to be doing this at 19 years old in just his rookie season already, this early on, is extremely impressive. Most rookies, when they go into the series, you don't see much from them. They don't look like veterans, but Pedro Acosta is riding like someone who's been in MotoGP for quite a number of years. So if he's doing this right now in his rookie season, imagine what he's going to be doing his second, third, fourth, fifth year, and so on in MotoGP. I'm going to make a bold prediction right now. I think he's going to be a future MotoGP world champion. I think he is really that good, and a name that we're going to have to continue to pay attention to in the MotoGP world, and absolutely think he should go to the factory team. You mentioned Joe Jack Miller has really been struggling a lot lately in MotoGP. He started off well, he got it there. I believe he was fifth was like the highest, fifth or sixth place, the highest he was, and then he just slid on back through the running order. Not good at all. And if Pedro Acosta keeps up with these performances throughout the rest of the season, and maybe he'll sneak out a win. It seems like he's going to at some point based on what we've seen so far this season. Jack Miller might really be on the hot seat, and it will not surprise me if we see Acosta get promoted to a factory team.
Well, Maverick Vinales also took the sprint win yesterday. Jorge Martin was third in the sprint, fourth in the Grand Prix. He leads Enea Bastianini in the standings right now. So, Kobe, how big was this for Martin to leave with a points lead as MotoGP heads to the European part of their season?
I think it's huge for Jorge Martin to get the lead as we head to Europe. Going to be going to Jerez at the end of the month of April in just a couple of weeks' time. Jorge Martin, we really expect him and Pecco Bagnaia to be duking it out for the championship this year. But as you can see in the standings, Pecco Bagnaia is down in fifth right now, kind of getting off to a slow start. This season, a lot had to do with the retirement in Portugal, but I'm sure as the season goes on, Pecco's going to be right up there with Jorge Martin. Those are probably the top two riders we expect to be battling for the championship this year. It's always good when you're at the top of the standing, but we just have just 3 Grand Prix down, and there's still a bunch of racing left to go. Yes, it's great that Jorge Martin has the lead right now, but if I was him, I would not feel safe right now because look how well Pedro Acosta is riding, and Maverick Vinales had a great race, and also you got Enea Bastianini up there. Yeah, so there's a lot out there for this championship.
A lot out there for this championship. Still a lot of races to go, but this has to be a huge boost of confidence for Jorge Martin because in the past we talked about you could have a great start. Enea Bastianini, when he was not with the factory team, had a great start a couple seasons ago. But then after the flyaway races, when they include Argentina, United States, Qatar, come to Europe, different story. Now, Jorge Martin, he's entering Europe with the points lead. He didn't have one race where he struggled. I know on the pre-race show we talked about this is going to be a test for him to see how he'll do in the track. He hasn't podium yet. Well, he still hasn't podium. His podium streak came to an end, but he ran 2 smart races, gathered the points, keep the points lead. I think he's feeling really good and confident as they're entering Europe. This is going to be essentially where they're going to get into that grind of race weekend after race weekend. Overall, he has to be feeling really good. That Pramac Ducati team, they have to be feeling really good. Again, having a customer team bringing the fight to the factory team. Probably some pressure on Bastianini because last year injury pretty much ruined his first year with the factory team. Now he's ahead of his teammate, the defending world champion, Pecco Bagnaia. I think there's going to be a little pressure on Bastianini. You got to perform. You got to do well, because if Jorge Martin is going to be contending for this championship, he's going to be looking at that factory seat with Ducati. So it's still a very early season, but I think overall Martin, he has to be grinning just thinking of the start he has had, and he's still leading as we start the European leg.
Well, Joe, Marc Marquez is known as the king of COTA. He had the lead. He took it from Acosta, but crashed out almost immediately after that. The front tire slid out, and his race was ruined from there. His teammate Alex Marquez in the same bike crashed out the lap before. So do you think this was a mistake on Mark's part, or was it more to do with the setup and the bike, or was he just pushing too hard given that he was in the lead?
It was very interesting because he said after the race he's not going to lose sleep after what happened. So I get the indication that the way he saw was he was racing hard, but he didn't put himself to where he made the mistake. Now, Marc Marquez is smart. He's not going to say anything that's going to sort of show the hand of that team. Overall, I think he knows maybe the bike was just not exactly set up to his liking, because his brother just crashed out the lap earlier. Then he went out there, and it was super quick. He didn't even have a chance to try to wrestle it up again. Overall, I think it was a tough break for him. I think at the end, though, it might be a little bit on the setup, but they're not going to tell us because obviously they're not going to give away a little bit of their hand. But Marc Marquez, I think he's going to be a threat for the win. It was great to see him up towards the front all weekend long. But yeah, hard racing. I think it just caught up Marc Marquez by surprise.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one other thing that he said after the race. He said that in the front he was experiencing brake issues throughout the race, and basically what happened was, he didn't say it was a brake failure, but he said it was just an issue with the brake in the front. But I guess we're going to assume that it was something like a brake failure, or whatever it was. And I guess that makes sense why he said he's not going to lose sleep over it, knowing that it wasn't something that he did wrong, that it was a problem with the bike there. But I totally agree with what you said, Joe. It was really nice to see him up front again, living up to the name King of COTA. If it wasn't for the issue with the brake on the front of the bike, I do wonder if Marc Marquez would have picked up yet another victory at the Grand Prix of the Americas. I still think seeing him on this Ducati bike up there at the front, leading and basically looking like the Marc Marquez of old, I think that's a huge shot in the arm for him. And if he can, continue to put together races, which is something that's been very hard for him to do in this last couple of years, or even, be healthy enough to participate in the races, I think if Marc Marquez can keep putting together these races, getting good results, I truly believe he could really have a great season.
And for the first time in 12 Grand Prix, Ducati rider not on the top step of the podium. Aprilia, Gas on a KTM bike, and Ducati made up the podium today. Martin, Bastianini, Vinales, and Acosta are your top four in the points as they run. Pecco Bagnaia, interestingly enough, has yet to finish on the podium since the first race weekend. I know we've only had a couple of races, but still a slower start to the year for him. So, Kobe, is this shaping up into an exciting season where Ducati won't be the ones necessarily dominating here?
At the end of the day, I still think it's a Ducati world, and we're going to be living in it. I believe Ducati is still going to, have the most race wins, and they're going to end up taking the championship with one of their riders this year. But with that said, I do think it's going to be a lot more competitive in 2024 than what we saw in 2023. Yeah, you got two Ducati riders at the top of the standings right now. And also Vinales today, getting the win for Aprilia. Pedro Acosta looks really good in the KTM. Like I said, I would not be surprised if we see him win this year. And then you look at Yamaha and Honda seem like they're out to lunch right now. Since in the post Marc Marquez era, Honda looks nowhere close to getting the win anytime soon. And Fabio Quartararo, though he just re-signed with Yamaha, he's just holding on for dear life right now. It's still really strange, to see Fabio Quartararo just like a few years ago, he was at the top of his game in MotoGP, at the front of the field, competing for wins and winning championships. And, now he's basically in the midfield, he's just out there riding around, and there's really nothing he can do on that Yamaha right now. But to answer your question, I think Ducati is still going to be the class of the field, but I think on any other day, when they're off their game, I think Aprilia and KTM can certainly challenge them. But with KTM, mostly Pedro Acosta, I think he's their best bet right now.
Overall, I think you have to consider Ducati as a favorite week in and week out, but it's going to be either Jorge Martin. His teammates really doing nothing. I mean, crashed out today. Franco Morbidelli just not having a good year at all. You look at the factory team, Enea Bastianini, not hurt, bringing the fight to Pecco. So you already got 3 riders there that are going to be contending for this championship. Overall, Maverick Vinales, we've seen Alesius with the Aprilias contend for the championship. If this Aprilia team could be just as strong, Maverick, if he could continue being what he's been doing this weekend, he could be up there. And Pedro Acosta, I think he'll still have some good races here and there. I just think still as a rookie, there's going to be that race where he DNFs. So I think it's going to really come down to the consistency. And especially with all the sprint races coming up, that's going to make it where if you could have a good sprint race, because we got to remember, a lot of times it was the sprint races that was the difference for Pecco Bagnaia getting the win and then not having a great Grand Prix race weekend, but those sprint points add up. So overall, I think it's going to be very close. And even with KTM, Brad Binder, if he could have more good weekends, he could climb up. I think he's still one step below everybody else, but I'm excited about this season. I don't think we're just going to see a Ducati runaway, especially when you look at VR46 Mooney. They haven't done much this year, so I don't think it's just going to be a cakewalk for Ducati compared to the past years. This is going to be, I think, game on, and we're going to see more at Jerez.
Let's look forward to in MotoGP. And in the meantime, we move on now to our Formula E recap. The doubleheader at the Misano circuit saw a lot of action. The race winner disqualified, the top 2 in points, not even scoring points in race 1, then a safety car in race 2, and then a last lap pass. Oliver Rowland, looking to make it 2 in a row, ran out of energy on the last lap. He and the team got their calculations wrong, considering we had a safety car and no laps added. Nissan team principal Tommaso Volpe said the data had something a bit wrong with their car. So, Joe, was this mistake something that would merit just a one-time brush off, not a big deal, or is this something that at this level is unacceptable that requires some stern conversations?
I definitely am leaning towards the stern conversations, because at the end of the day, Rowland went from the points lead to not leading the points lead. His consecutive podium streak came to an end, and for it to be data-driven, it makes me think, okay, where was the issue with the data being projected? Because we saw during the race, as Formula E is showing the energy level, his energy level was going down significantly faster. So the viewers all saw it. I would assume somebody in the team would have to catch it. So there has to be some big discussions going on, because for Nissan, we got to remember, Nissan is what was the Renault team. Then they switched to Nissan. They put in a lot of effort into this program. They're really starting to see some great results, and especially from Oliver Rowland. I think they have to say, let's sit down, figure out what's going on, because this is unacceptable, period. We had this race pretty much won, and it went up in smoke. Well, an empty battery, essentially, not smoke. But overall, this is a big deal for Nissan. They have to say, okay, we got to fix this. We cannot let this happen again, because we lost valuable points from fastest lap, 25 points, to no points. Fastest lap, I don't remember who it went to, but that's a valuable point gone. If this is the difference, 3 points, they're going to be pointing at this race as this is where we lost the championship.
Well, Pascal Wehrlein ended up inheriting that win. He's the first driver to win multiple races this year. So we have 6 different winners in the first 7 races. Jake Dennis and Nick Cassidy rounded off the podium in 2nd and 3rd. Rookie Jahan Daruvala scored a point with his 10th place finish, the only rookie to do so. Wehrlein and Dennis are now tied for the championship lead. Rowland, however, went from the lead to 3rd. So, like you mentioned, Joe, very costly calculation error there. Dennis is tied for the championship despite only 1 win behind Wehrlein's 2. Is this deja vu to last year again in your mind, Joe?
It is, and this is going to be, I think, a very fun year, because last year it was these two. It was wondering who's going to get the better run? Jake Dennis, the consistency. Didn't have to win, but he had the consistency on his side, pulled off the championship. And I think this is going to be, again, setting up for another exciting year where you got Jake Dennis. He, I believe, race 1 started as far back as 18th and got a podium. He is really good, and he has some tracks where I think you got to look at Portland, very similar, the big wide speedway. He could go climb up the field. London, he's good at that as well. Berlin, he's fair there. Pascal Wehrlein, probably excited about that, but then you got Shanghai. That's going to be brand new for everybody. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Pascal Wehrlein can do. Can he bring up that consistency? Because he doesn't have it to Jake Dennis, but he seems to be one of those drivers. If he has a fast car and he's towards the front, he could find his way to victory lane more frequently. It's just a matter of finding that consistency. That's what Jake Dennis has. This could be a very interesting championship battle.
Well, yesterday we had some post-race drama. The race winner, Antonio Felix da Costa, was disqualified. It was for a part they used but didn't list on the current car. So despite it being a legal part that didn't give a performance advantage, he was disqualified from the race results. And in the end, the team is responsible for having it listed. So, Joe, do you think that this is a bit harsh given that there was no performance advantage? It still results in disqualification based on something that the team forgot to do, just listing their parts off.
Yes, especially this is a part that's legal. I don't see why it can't be a monetary fine, something where you didn't get a performance advantage. This is a part that is essentially it's been there before. It's just, oh, we forgot to list it that is on the car. I can only imagine there's probably a huge checklist for all the cars and everybody and all the teams to remember. So overall, to say because of this, despite it not giving you any sort of an advantage, no advantage at all, the rule says you're disqualified, so you go from winner, the big trophy celebration, celebrating with the crowd, because they bring the entire crowd right up to the podium where they give you the trophy. You spray champagne with the team. Antonio Felix da Costa even did his customary finest swimming pool, jump in there, still in his fire suit, bringing the trophy, all the celebration. And then 5 hours later, and you're disqualified because your team forgot to list a part, which is legal, and it didn't give you advantage. Come on. A monetary fine, I think, could have gotten the point clear that, hey, teams, just remember to do this. It was way too harsh, and I think this is something FIA Formula E should review because we've talked about this before. We can understand, like in other series where, you might have a disqualification, but it's because they clearly had an advantage. There was no advantage. 5 hours later, you get home. If you didn't watch the news, you came to the racetrack again. It's like, what do you mean da Costa didn't win? I saw him win. Well, long story short, he didn't. Way too harsh.
Yeah, I'll break the moderator's role here for just a second because I totally agree with you. I think that if it's something like this, then a monetary fine makes a lot more sense than taking a win away. I think, like you mentioned, Joe, a good point there for the fans of the track that actually saw the car cross the finish line first, and then they figure out that this is the reason why. It's not a part on the car, but gave a clear performance advantage. It's not an illegal move that the driver made on track. But that a penalty would take the win away. It seems very, very harsh to me. So hopefully hopefully Formula E and the FIA look into that and try to make amends for something like that if it happens again in the future, because I think that the punishment certainly does not fit the crime here. Now, ever since season one, part of a strategy has, of course, been energy management here in Formula E, but we've seen pack racing, or as many call it, peloton racing, in almost every race this year. The field is spread out at street courses of Diriyah, Sao Paulo, and Tokyo. Misano, the big pack, however, a lot like the Portland race, and Joe, you certainly know all about that, seeing that last year on site. Today's race was 2 laps shorter than yesterday's. All that taken into consideration, Joe, just the rest of the season, do you think we'll see more pack racing as we continue throughout the year?
I do see more, especially Portland. That's a given, unless they do something drastic to change that up. The wide nature of that track, as Jake Dennis said in the post-race press conference, really is that chicane, the Shelton chicane, that's the only opportunity to break it up. But it's so wide still, you could have 2, sometimes 3 wide go out there. and you just have that full pack. Berlin could be an interesting one as well. That second half of the lap where you get out of sweeping corners, that where you could see some breakup. London, I think that's going to be really the one track that you could for sure say we're not going to see the big pack. Obviously, Monaco, but that's really hard to be pack racing. That would be insane if we get that. I'm going to be really interested to see what happens in Shanghai because this is going to be a brand new track. Sao Paulo, we still saw some of that pack racing element. I think you're going to see in Shanghai. So overall, I do think we're going to see more pack racing, which is very interesting because I know the drivers are pretty opinionated about this. Some of the race fans as well. But with this generation of car, I just feel like it leads to the pack racing once we get these quick pit stop type things in the future that could potentially break it up. But I think it's going to be a lot more pack racing. So drivers like Jake Dennis, who seems to work his way to the front, Nick Cassidy, if he doesn't get wrecked, is always towards the front. I think you're going to see them really embracing this, even though they may not like it. It could really suit their driving style. But yeah, really, Monaco and London, I think, is where you're not going to see the pack racing. But everywhere else, especially Portland, that's all it's going to be is just pack racing.
Well, looking ahead, Joe, like you mentioned, Monaco is next for the last race of the first half of the season. And then after Monaco, there's only 4 race weekends, but all of them are double headers. Berlin, Shanghai, Portland, and London will round off the year. So are we at the point where some teams and drivers might have to start accepting the fact that a championship for them in 2024 is going to be out of reach?
Easily the first team and drivers, the championship's out of reach is Mahindra, unless they could somehow pull off the biggest miracle comeback, score points, claim the ton of wins. But that's a big thing, though. Overall, we had our first repeat winner this year with Pascal Wehrlein. So if somebody was to get hot, 3-4 wins, podium finishes, and you still had everyone else having the issues, not consistent, you could get up there. But overall, I think you're looking at really the top 7 are the contenders. Mitch Evans, he is very hit or miss. This race weekend, it started off with a pole on race 1, got a top 10 finish, but then this race, not exactly a factor, and then his car came to a stop. We thought we were going to get a second safety car, but he got a run-in. That just ruined his weekend. McLaren, I think McLaren is one of those teams where they got the win with Sam Bird. So they're very happy about that. But Jake Hughes got the pole, had a penalty. He is not performing like at the level he was last year when he was surprising everybody with his performances. Oliver Rowland, if that Nissan team could continue being as strong as they were, because really, if they had their data all correct, we'd be talking about Oliver Rowland sweeping the weekend, first-time winner, but that went out the drain. So overall, I think this is going to be a very interesting battle between those top 7 drivers, their teammates. They might contend for a win. Antonio Felix da Costa, this has just been a lousy season. Nothing seems to be going good for him. I don't know if he'll be exactly a contender. He could still get a win here and there, but he's going to have to play catch up. And really, I think everybody else is playing catch up unless somehow, like I said, the magic number, I think, is if you could get 3 wins, multiple podiums, you could be in the contention as well because we're just about to halfway point. Anything can happen. Formula E is one of the most unpredictable series. We don't need to bring the Wheel of Destiny yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah, well, and like you mentioned, Mahindra with Motaro and De Vries, I don't even think we had room for them on our driver standings graphic. They're outside the top 20, the only drivers yet to score this year. So probably over for them and a couple other teams at the back, even if it's not a mathematical elimination just yet. I think we do have a good sense of the top teams and who might be championship contenders here as we get into the second half of the season. So we will keep an eye on that. In the meantime, we'll bring Kobe back in because week 2 of the grid ranking has just been released. Kobe, tell us all about it.
That's right. Week 2 of the grid ranking is officially here, and for the first time since 2022, there's a change for the lead. In the second week, Will Brown became the 3rd Supercars driver to lead the grid ranking and first Australian to lead it as well. Shane Van Gisbergen and Scott McLaughlin, both from New Zealand, were the 2 other drivers from Supercars to lead. Brown's teammate Brock Feeney is 2nd in the ranking. And so, Joe, I'm going to ask this to you. Supercars back on track next weekend in New Zealand. Is Will Brown the favorite to win, or is the returning champion Brody Kostecki going to be a threat for the win?
Brody Kostecki's going to definitely be the top headline. He's back. We're going to see what he could do at the track. But I think still Triple Eight has to feel they are the favorite to get the wins this next upcoming race weekend. I think it's going to be a matter of how the two teammates are going to race each other. I mean, it's interesting. The two teammates right there, first and second, they're going to go out there trying to get the win all weekend long. So I am very excited to see what happens with these two. But I think Will Brown, him and Brody have to be the two favorites. It's just going to be one of those races where the headlines are going to be all about Brody Kostecki, but really Will Brown, Brock Feeney, those are the two everybody's going to be watching for the win.
Yeah, and I want to say one thing about Will Brown. I think in just a few races that we've seen so far in 2024, he's really shutting a lot of critics up, including myself. I wasn't completely doubting Will Brown, but after seeing what we saw last season, it looked like at one point he would be the favorite of Brody Kostecki to win the championship, and then like second half of the season, he just kind of collapsed, just fell off the map, while Brody Kostecki, cemented himself as one of the championship favorites. And I wondered, Will Brown, a lot of pressure replacing Shane Van Gisbergen at Red Bull and racing the Triple Eight operation. I wondered if Will Brown could live up to those expectations of replacing SVG in one of the best cars in the series. And so far, he's absolutely looked like the part. And based on everything we've seen from Will Brown in 2024, if you didn't know he was driving the car, you would think SVG is driving it. That's how good Will Brown has looked in the first few races. So I do think that he'll be one of the favorites to win, and also his teammate Brock Feeney as well. And like you're saying, the main storyline is going to be Brody Kostecki all throughout the weekend in New Zealand. But at the end of the day, I think it may take a minute for Brody to get up to speed, as you saw when he did the test at Winton. He said he's still getting his feet back under him, because there's nothing like trying to shake off all of that offseason rust. And he's had a longer offseason than a lot of the other supercars drivers. So I think it may take him a little bit to get back in the swing of things. But I think Brody will be getting some good finishes for Erebus. And like I said on previous episodes, I believe on Grit Tonight, I said that Brody's going to be a good evaluator where the Erebus program is at right now, because based on what we've seen from Hazelwood and Jack LeBrock, it really seems like Erebus is taking a step back over the offseason. But I think Brody is going to be able to give them a great chance to see where that program is at. If you have Brody Kostecki behind a Willow car, and if he can't find victory lane for you, then it tells you, that Erebus has a problem. And now I'm switching over to Formula E. The Formula E's championship standings are tied up top between Pascal Wehrlein and Jake Dennis. And our ratings, Dennis is ahead, as he is again the most consistent driver in Formula E. He did not score points in the third race of the year, a 12th place finish in the second Dairy E pre-race in Saudi Arabia. Now I'm gonna send this question over to you, Ben. Based on our Formula E ratings, is Jake Dennis the favorite to claim the championship?
I think so. I think he's peaking at the right time here, looking at the results from this weekend. A pair of runner-up finishes, 3 podiums in a row. Got a win earlier this season, and level on points with Pascal Wehrlein. Wehrlein may have the edge on wins now, but I think Dennis has the edge on consistency, and I think that makes him the championship favorite at this point in time. Now, we're just about to hit the halfway point of the year. There's still plenty of time for things to change, drivers to pick up different momentum. I think Oliver Rowland, again, certainly has a lot of momentum right now, or he did at least until race 2 this weekend. Hopefully it's not a complete momentum killer for his championship's sake, and we can get a 3-way battle, potentially maybe even more than that up front here for Formula E. But as of right now, obviously your 2 front runners of a 2 tie for the points lead, but I would give Jake Dennis rather the slight edge over Pascal Wehrlein at this point, despite what the result sheet looked like today with Wehrlein being on top ahead of him.
Yeah, it's going to be fun following Formula E the rest of this season. And now taking a look at the full grid ranking, Chase Elliott is back in the grid ranking for the first time since 2022. Formula E's Oliver Rowland fell many spots after running out of energy on the final lap. And Pedro Acosta, the rookie sensation from MotoGP, is here as well, the only rookie in the grid ranking. And now I'm going to turn over to Joe for everyone's favorite segment, our Grid One Shining Moment.
One shining moment. We encourage everyone in the chat room comment with your shining moment from this race weekend. Ben, starting with you. We had Formula E, we had MotoGP, we had NASCAR. What is your shining moment?
Well, my shining moment has to be from MotoGP. And again, really glad I turned that race on. I had the Masters on Big TV. Congratulations to Scotty Scheffler on a dominant performance there at Augusta today. But I had to pull the MotoGP race up because I saw you guys going crazy in the chat with the great racing we were seeing. And it certainly lived up to the hype in the second half as well. And Maverick Vinales, again, it's been a while since we saw him have a drive like that, or a ride like that, I guess I should say, in MotoGP. And great to see him get the win. And who knows, like we were talking about earlier in the show, it might lead to some bigger and better things for him throughout the rest of 2024. But him getting that win, that is my one shining moment from this weekend.
Yeah, we'll have to see if we're going to make it unanimous with Joe. I also got to give my one shine to MotoGP as well. Like I said earlier, I thought it was an all-time classic. I don't know if MotoGP has a channel where like we do for NASCAR Classic, but if there should be a MotoGP Classics channel, this will be one of the races that will be on there. A race that you're going to be talking about a few years from now, how good it was. I feel like MotoGP is in a sweet spot right now, especially after Liberty Media ended up buying it. It's going to be interesting to see what Liberty is able to do with MotoGP. But I feel like MotoGP is where Formula One was, just several years ago. They were about to strike gold in America with getting a lot more Americans into Formula One. And based on what we saw today, if this on track product stays where it's at, continues to get better, and they get a few other things figured out with MotoGP, maybe Liberty Media can find a sweet spot with MotoGP as well. And races like today make people like myself, who usually end up having to watch highlights of these races instead of catching them live to talk about it here in the air. Races like today makes me actually want to wake up early in the morning just to watch MotoGP because it's just that good, and I want to learn more about all the great personalities they have over in this sport. It was just such an incredible race. It's a race that makes me want to become an even bigger fan of MotoGP.
It's gonna be unanimous. MotoGP, this race, like you said, Kobe, all-time classic, and so many great storylines. From you had Marc Marquez, the king of COTA, future legend, easily a legend of sport. Now he goes out, crashes while racing a rookie, a 19-year-old rookie who could easily be the future of MotoGP. You had Jorge Martin, who has gone from a fast rider that will just crash out the worst times to now being a championship contender. He could easily be a championship contender for a long time. The story of Maverick Vinales going from being fired by Yamaha, looked like he's done with MotoGP. Here comes Aprilia. It all comes together. This race was just phenomenal. Great racing all around. This is definitely something where if you're a fan, casual fan of MotoGP, and you've been thinking, okay, this Ducati, it just, wow. Throw it up back from behind, because at the end of the day, MotoGP, I am excited for the second half. For the European leg of the season. Not the second half yet, so we still got plenty of MotoGP racing, thankfully. But this was a very exciting race. The last time I felt race was this exciting was probably Phillips Island in 2022, where very similar. That's where we saw Rins hold off Marc Marquez. But 2023 was a Ducati show. Now the show is MotoGP. All the riders, folks that are getting into it, especially with Liberty Media, and we know what Liberty Media did to F1. They had to feel pretty good, like, okay, we got something to work with. We got some great racing, great riders, and overall, it's going to be a great future for MotoGP. I think MotoGP, unanimous shining moment from the Grid Network. And of course, Ben will be on the air for Grid Life Encore. They're going to be talking about that fantastic finish in the Xfinity Series race. Kobe will be on the air Grid tonight to discuss all the latest news. Wednesday, we'll definitely be following some of the big news that occurs. And then, of course, Women Motorsports, Ben, Isha, and I will be on the air, and we'll do this all over again with Grid Live pre-race. So don't miss any of those programs. Hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get the notification where we're on the air. That way you can participate in the chat room as well. And consider investing in us through Patreon. Call the show. Mark, Ron, David, Matt have been investing in us for quite some time. They got the Grid Network stickers. You can also do Buy Me a Coffee, Super Chat. Well, thank you on the air. If you're not watching us live and you do a YouTube thanks or buy me a coffee, we'll thank you on the air when we go on the air the next time. And of course, you can always buy a cup of coffee for anyone in particular in the Grid Network team. We just thank you for tuning in and supporting us. It's been a fun time since we started this in 2020, and we're going to keep bringing you more coverage. We got a busy weekend next weekend, so be sure to follow us right here. For Kobe Lambeth and Ben Schneider, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's show. We'll see you next time.